An Arab millionaire meets a young country girl in an unexpected encounter that challenges their opposite worlds. Days later, the girl makes a move he never expected, leaving him completely puzzled. In the heart of Cedar Grove, where maple trees lined the cobblestone streets and time seemed to move at its own gentle pace, Isabella Martinez stood behind the counter of her grandmother's general store, Martinez Family Goods. The morning sun filtered through the storefront windows, casting a warm glow on the weathered wooden shelves, stocked with everything from fresh produce to handmade crafts. Isabella adjusted her dark curls, tucking them behind her ear as she finished arranging a display of local honey jars. At 26, she had become the backbone of both the store and the community, known for her unwavering determination and infectious smile. The store bell chimed as Mrs. Thompson, one of their regular customers, entered with her usual grace. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Thompson called out, her silver hair neatly pinned back. "I hope you have some of that wonderful sourdough bread your grandmother makes. It's the only thing Thomas will eat for breakfast these days." "Fresh from the oven this morning," Isabella replied, reaching for a paper-wrapped loaf. The familiar scent of baked goods and coffee filled the air, a comforting constant in their small town of 3,000 souls. As she served Mrs. Thompson, Isabella's grandmother, Elena, emerged from the back room, her apron dusted with flour. "Bella, don't forget about the delivery to Metropolitan Foods in the city today. It's our biggest order of preserves yet." The reminder sent a flutter of excitement through Isabella's stomach. The order represented a potential breakthrough for their small business, a chance to showcase their traditional preserves to a wider market. "I'll head out right after lunch, Abuela," she promised, already mentally preparing for the hour-long drive to the city. The morning passed in a blur of familiar faces and friendly conversations. By early afternoon, Isabella had loaded her old blue pickup truck with crates of carefully packed jars. Each contained preserves made from recipes passed down through generations of Martinez women. The drive to the city transformed the landscape from rolling hills and farmland to a jungle of glass and steel. Isabella found herself holding her breath as she navigated the busy streets, so different from the peaceful lanes of Cedar Grove. The Metropolitan Foods building loomed ahead, a towering structure of gleaming windows that seemed to touch the clouds. Parking in the underground garage, Isabella smoothed her simple floral dress and grabbed the sample case. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt like ascending into another world. The doors opened to reveal a pristine lobby where everything sparkled with corporate efficiency. "I'm here to deliver an order for Metropolitan Foods," she told the receptionist, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. The woman barely glanced up, gesturing toward a side hallway with perfectly manicured nails. As Isabella rounded the corner, her attention split between reading the door numbers and balancing the heavy sample case. Fate intervened in the form of a hurried executive exiting a conference room. The collision was spectacular. Her sample case went flying, and the man's expensive suit received an impromptu baptism of coffee. "I am so sorry," Isabella exclaimed, mortified as she watched the dark liquid seep into what was clearly a custom-tailored suit. Looking up, she found herself staring into the most intense green eyes she'd ever seen, set in a face that seemed more suited to a magazine cover than a corporate office. Karim al-Rashid, though Isabella didn't yet know his name, stood frozen for a moment, coffee dripping from his sleeve. His expression shifted from shock to something unreadable as he took in the scene before him. "Do you always make such an entrance?" he asked, his accent adding an exotic edge to his words. "Only when I'm trying to impress potential clients," Isabella shot back before she could stop herself, immediately biting her lip at her own audacity. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. The hallway quickly filled with assistants, armed with napkins and concerned expressions, but Karim waved them away, his attention fixed on Isabella. "And what exactly are you trying to sell besides coffee stains?" Isabella straightened her shoulders, remembering her grandmother's words about pride in their work. "Traditional preserves, made from recipes that have been in my family for generations. Each jar contains more than just fruit and sugar. It contains our heritage, our story." Something flickered in Karim's eyes, interest perhaps, or amusement. "Well, Miss Martinez, Isabella Martinez, Miss Martinez. It seems you've already made quite an impression. Why don't you tell me more about these preserves of yours, preferably over a fresh cup of coffee, one that stays in the cup this time? Little did Isabella know that this awkward encounter would set in motion events that would change not only her life, but the fate of her entire hometown. As she followed Karim to his office, she couldn't have imagined that the man whose suit she had just ruined would soon become both her greatest adversary and her most unexpected ally. The executive office where Karim led Isabella was larger than her grandmother's entire store. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, making Isabella feel as though she were floating above the world she knew. She perched carefully on the edge of a sleek leather chair, her sample case balanced on her lap like a shield. "So, Miss Martinez," Karim began, settling behind his imposing desk after changing into a fresh suit. "Tell me about these preserves that warranted such a dramatic introduction." His tone carried a hint of amusement that both irritated and intrigued Isabella. She opened her case, presenting her jars with practiced care. Each flavor represents a different season in Cedar Grove. The strawberry preserves come from the spring festival harvest, the blackberry from our summer gathering tradition. As she spoke, her initial nervousness melted away, replaced by genuine passion for her family's legacy. Karim listened with unexpected attention, occasionally interrupting with surprisingly astute questions about production methods and ingredients. When he finally tasted the samples, his eyebrows rose appreciatively. "This is different from what I expected. There's an authenticity here that's quite rare." "That's because it's made with respect for tradition and community," Isabella explained, warming to her subject. "Every ingredient comes from local farmers we've known for generations." "Cedar Grove," Karim mused, studying the label. "That's about an hour north of here, isn't it?" Something in his tone made Isabella look up sharply, but his expression revealed nothing. Before she could respond, his office door opened, and a sharp-featured woman in a designer suit entered without knocking. "Mr. Al-Rashid, the board is waiting for your decision about the Cedar Valley project." "Grove," Isabella corrected automatically. "It's Cedar Grove." The woman's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched as she noticed Isabella for the first time. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Sarah, meet Miss Martinez from Cedar Grove. She's introducing us to some local products." Karim's voice held a note of authority that made Sarah step back slightly. "I'll be there shortly." After Sarah left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Isabella began carefully packing her samples, her mind racing. Something about the exchange felt off, but she couldn't quite place why. "Your preserves are excellent, Miss Martinez," Karim said finally, standing. "I think we can definitely find a place for them in our specialty foods line. Sarah will handle the details of the contract." Isabella stood as well, smoothing her dress. "Thank you, Mr. Al-Rashid. This opportunity means a lot to our family business." As she turned to leave, Karim called after her. "Miss Martinez." She paused at the door. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of each other soon." The drive back to Cedar Grove gave Isabella time to process the strange meeting. Something about Karim Al-Rashid bothered her, not his obvious wealth or power, but the way he'd reacted to the mention of her hometown. She pushed the thought aside as she pulled up to the store, where her grandmother was waiting expectantly. "Cómo te fue, mi amor?" Elena asked, helping Isabella with the now lighter sample case. "They love the preserves, abuela. They want to carry our whole line." Isabella hugged her grandmother, sharing in the moment of triumph. The celebration was short-lived. That evening, as Isabella was closing up the store, her childhood friend Michael burst in, his face flushed with excitement and concern. "Have you seen this?" he demanded, slapping a document onto the counter. Isabella scanned the paper, her heart sinking with each word. It was a notice of a town hall meeting to discuss a proposed development project, a massive food processing facility that would require significant land acquisition in Cedar Grove. "Look who's behind it," Michael pointed to the bottom of the page. There, printed in bold letters, was the name that made everything click into place: Al-Rashid International Industries. The coffee-stained suit, the knowing looks, Sarah's interrupted announcement. It all made sense now. Isabella's hands clenched around the paper. Her meeting with Karim hadn't been a coincidence at all. He'd known exactly who she was and where she was from. While she'd been proudly sharing her family's traditions, he'd been planning to transform her beloved hometown into an industrial complex. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink outside the store windows, Isabella made a silent vow. Karim al-Rashid might have wealth and power on his side, but she had something stronger: the love for her community and the determination to protect it. The real battle for Cedar Grove's soul was about to begin, and she intended to fight with everything she had. The town hall buzzed with tension as residents filled every available seat. Isabella sat in the front row beside her grandmother, watching as Karim al-Rashid strode onto the makeshift stage. He looked even more imposing than she remembered, his tailored suit and confident bearing a stark contrast to the modest surroundings of Cedar Grove's community center. "Good evening," Karim began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "I'm here to present an opportunity that will transform Cedar Grove into a model of modern rural development." Behind him, a screen displayed glossy renderings of the proposed facility, all gleaming steel and glass, completely alien to the town's historic character. Isabella studied the faces around her as Karim outlined his vision: jobs, economic growth, international investment. Some of her neighbors nodded appreciatively at the mention of employment opportunities, while others frowned at the maps showing which areas would be repurposed for the project. "The proposed facility will require approximately 200 acres, Karim continued, including the land currently occupied by the old market district. He paused, his eyes finding Isabella's in the crowd. "We're prepared to offer generous compensation to affected property owners." Eleanor's hand tightened on Isabella's arm. Their store sat right in the heart of the market district, alongside businesses that had served the community for generations. The Martinez family store wasn't just a building, it was the culmination of decades of hard work, starting when Isabella's grandparents had first arrived in Cedar Grove with nothing but dreams and determination. Unable to contain herself any longer, Isabella stood. "Mr. al-Rashid, you speak of compensation as if our community can be bought and sold like commodities on the stock market. But what about the things that can't be measured in dollars? The relationships, the traditions, the very fabric of our town?" Karim's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Progress often requires difficult choices, Miss Martinez. Change is inevitable. Progress doesn't have to mean destruction," Isabella countered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You're not offering us development. You're offering us erasure." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement and protest. Sarah, standing at Karim's side, whispered something in his ear, but he waved her off, his attention fixed on Isabella. "Perhaps you'd care to elaborate on your concerns," he challenged, a hint of their earlier banter creeping into his tone. "What exactly would you propose instead?" Isabella felt every eye in the room turn to her. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the center aisle. "I propose we show Mr. al-Rashid exactly what he's trying to destroy. Next weekend is our annual Harvest Festival. Why don't you stay and see firsthand what makes Cedar Grove special?" A smile played at the corners of Karim's mouth. "Are you inviting me to your festival, Miss Martinez?" "I'm inviting you to open your eyes," Isabella replied. "Stay for the weekend, walk our streets, talk to our people, then tell us if you still think we're nothing but a business opportunity." The challenge hung in the air between them. Sarah stepped forward, already shaking her head. "Mr. al-Rashid's schedule is extremely full." "I accept," Karim interrupted, surprising everyone, including himself, judging by his expression. "One weekend to prove your point, Miss Martinez." As the meeting dissolved into excited chatter, Isabella made her way outside, needing air. She found herself in the community garden where she'd played as a child, the evening air heavy with the scent of late summer flowers. "That was quite a performance," Karim's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing in the garden entrance, his suit jacket draped over one arm. "It wasn't a performance," Isabella replied. "This is my home. These are my people, and I will fight for them." Karim stepped closer, studying her with those intense green eyes. "You really believe you can change my mind?" "I believe in showing people the truth," Isabella said. "The question is, are you willing to see it?" For a moment they stood in silence, the garden's old wind chimes creating a gentle melody above them. Finally, Karim spoke, his voice softer than before. "You know, in all my years of development projects, no one has ever challenged me quite like this." "Maybe it's time someone did," Isabella responded, turning to leave. But his next words stopped her. "The preserves contract, It wasn't a ploy, he said. Your products are genuinely exceptional. Isabella looked back at him, moonlight silvering his features. Then maybe that should tell you something about the value of what you're trying to replace. As she walked away, Isabella felt Karim's gaze following her. She had one weekend to save her town, to make him understand what couldn't be captured in business proposals and profit projections. The festival would be her battlefield, and she intended to wage this war not with weapons or words, but with the very soul of Cedar Grove itself. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned bright and clear, the air crisp with the first hints of autumn. Isabella stood in the town square, surveying the bustling preparations. Colourful banners fluttered between lampposts, and the scent of cinnamon and apples wafted from rows of food stalls. "Everything looks perfect, Bella," Eleanor said, joining her granddaughter. "Your parents would be so proud to see you leading this." Isabella's heart twinged at the mention of her parents, lost years ago in an accident. She squeezed her grandmother's hand. "I just hope it's enough to show Al-Rashid what he's really up against." As if summoned by her words, a sleek black car pulled up to the square. Karim emerged, looking slightly out of place in his casual attire. Designer jeans and a soft sweater that probably cost more than most of the festival decorations combined. Sarah followed, tapping away on her tablet with a pinched expression. Isabella approached them, forcing a smile. "Welcome to the Cedar Grove Harvest Festival. I hope you're ready for a full day." Karim's eyes roamed the square, taking in the details. "I must admit it's more elaborate than I expected." "Just wait until you see what's beyond the square," Isabella replied. "Follow me." She led them through the festival grounds, pointing out local artisans demonstrating traditional crafts, children participating in old-fashioned games, and the community mural project that had transformed a once drab wall into a vibrant timeline of Cedar Grove's history. At the pie judging contest, Isabella noticed Karim's polite interest starting to shift into genuine curiosity. When Mrs. Thompson offered him a slice of her famous apple pie, he hesitated only briefly before accepting. "This is exceptional," he admitted after tasting it. "The balance of flavors, the texture of the crust, it's unlike anything I've had before." Mrs. Thompson beamed. "That's because it's made with love, young man. And apples from trees my great-grandfather planted." Isabella watched as something flickered in Karim's eyes, a hint of understanding perhaps, but Sarah quickly interjected, "Mr. Al-Rashid, we should move on. There's still the matter of the land surveys to discuss." The moment broken, they continued their tour. As they passed the community center, Michael intercepted them, his guitar slung over his shoulder. "Bella, we need you for the opening ceremony." "You're not getting out of singing this year." Isabella flushed. "Michael, I don't think—" "Singing." Karim raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at his lips. "This wasn't in the official schedule." "It's tradition," Michael explained. "Bella's been opening the festival with a song since she was a kid. Her voice is the heart of Cedar Grove." Before Isabella could protest further, she found herself being ushered onto the small stage in the center of the square. The familiar faces of her community looked up at her expectantly, and among them Karim stood with an unreadable expression. Taking a deep breath, Isabella began to sing. The song was an old folk melody, passed down through generations in Cedar Grove. As her voice rose clear and sweet, a hush fell over the crowd. She sang of harvests and hard times, of love and loss, of a community bound together by more than just geography. When the last note faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the square erupted in applause. Isabella stepped off the stage, her cheeks flushed, to find Karim staring at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "That was unexpected," he said softly. "That's Cedar Grove," she replied. "Always more than meets the eye." As the day wore on, Isabella noticed subtle changes in Karim's demeanor. He laughed genuinely at the three-legged race, rolled up his sleeves to help a group of children build a scarecrow, and engaged in lengthy conversations with town elders about Cedar Grove's history. By sunset, the festival was in full swing. Lanterns cast a warm glow over the square as couples swayed to the music of a local band. Isabella found Karim standing apart from the crowd, watching the scene with a thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, offering him a mug of hot cider. He accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. "I'm thinking about something my father once told me," he said slowly. that true wealth isn't counted in bank accounts, but in the richness of one's community. Isabella's heart leapt with hope. And what do you think about that now? Karim turned to her, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. I think I may have been too hasty in my judgment of Cedar Grove. Before Isabella could respond, Sarah appeared, her face taut with concern. Mr. Al-Rashid, there's an urgent call from the board. They're not pleased with the delays. The moment shattered. Karim's expression closed off, the businessman replacing the man who had begun to see Cedar Grove's true value. I'll take it in the car, he said, already moving away. As Isabella watched him go, she felt a mix of frustration and determination. She had made progress, she was sure of it, but the battle for Cedar Grove's future was far from over, and she knew the real challenge lay ahead. The festival continued around her, a testament to everything she was fighting for. With renewed resolve, Isabella rejoined her community, knowing that tomorrow would bring new struggles and perhaps new opportunities to show Karim the true heart of Cedar Grove. The days following the Harvest Festival brought an uneasy quiet to Cedar Grove. Isabella threw herself into work at the store, all the while keeping an ear to the ground for any news about Al-Rashid International's plans. Karim had left town abruptly after the festival, leaving behind a wake of uncertainty and speculation. One crisp morning, as Isabella was arranging a display of locally made jams, the store's bell chimed. She looked up to see Karim himself standing in the doorway, looking slightly out of place in his tailored coat. Mr. Al-Rashid, she said, surprise coloring her voice. I didn't expect to see you back so soon. He approached the counter, his expression unreadable. I've been doing some thinking, Miss Martinez, about Cedar Grove, about the project, about everything, really. Isabella's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. And what conclusions have you reached? Karim's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the man who had helped build scarecrows and listened to old town stories. I've decided to propose some modifications to our original plan. I'd like to discuss them with you if you're willing. Relief and suspicion warred within Isabella. Of course, but why me? A small smile tugged at Karim's lips. Because you've proven to be the strongest advocate for this town. I'd be a fool not to listen to what you have to say. They agreed to meet later that afternoon at the local cafe. As Karim left, Isabella couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and trepidation. Was this a genuine olive branch, or just another corporate tactic? The cafe was buzzing with the usual afternoon crowd when Isabella arrived. She spotted Karim at a corner table, poring over a stack of documents. As she approached, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes, a crack in his usually impeccable facade. Thank you for meeting me, he said, gesturing for her to sit. I've been working on a revised proposal that I think might address some of your concerns. Isabella listened intently as Karim outlined his new vision. The food processing facility would be scaled down significantly, preserving much of the old market district. There would be investments in upgrading existing infrastructure rather than wholesale replacement. Most surprisingly, he proposed a partnership program that would allow local businesses to supply the facility, ensuring that Cedar Grove's traditional products would reach a wider market. It's not what I expected, Isabella admitted when he finished, but it's a start. There are still issues to address, particularly regarding environmental impact and long-term community benefits. Karim nodded, running a hand through his hair in a surprisingly human gesture. I'm open to further adjustments. The truth is, Miss Martinez, your festival, it made me reconsider some fundamental assumptions about progress and community value. As they delved deeper into the details, Isabella found herself genuinely engaged in the discussion. Karim's knowledge was impressive, but so was his newfound willingness to listen and adapt. Hours passed unnoticed as they debated, suggested, and occasionally found common ground. It was early evening when they finally emerged from the cafe. The setting sun painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, casting a warm glow over Cedar Grove's main street. I never thought I'd say this, Isabella said, but I think we might actually be getting somewhere. Karim chuckled, a surprisingly warm sound. You're a formidable negotiator, Miss Martinez. I can see why this town rallies behind you. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with something more than just professional respect. Isabella felt her cheeks warm, and she quickly looked away. "There's still a lot to work out," she said, breaking the moment. "And I'll need to discuss this with the town council." "Of course," Karim agreed. "I'll have my team prepare a formal presentation. But I wanted you to be the first to know about these changes." As they parted ways, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, not just in the plans for Cedar Grove, but in her perception of Karim al-Rashid. He was no longer just the faceless corporate threat, but a complex individual capable of growth and change. Walking home, Isabella's mind raced with the possibilities and challenges ahead. The battle for Cedar Grove's future was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like there might be a path forward that could benefit everyone. As she reached the store, she paused to look back down the street. In the fading light, she could just make out Karim's figure, standing alone in the town square. He seemed to be taking in the scene, the historic buildings, the old-growth trees, the sense of community that permeated every corner of Cedar Grove. In that moment, Isabella allowed herself to hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they had found a way to bridge their two worlds, to create something that honored the past while embracing the future. But as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, she reminded herself that the real work was only just beginning. The weeks following Karim's revised proposal were a whirlwind of activity in Cedar Grove. Town hall meetings became heated affairs as residents debated the merits and risks of the new plan. Isabella found herself at the center of it all, mediating between different factions, explaining complex details, and working tirelessly to ensure that every voice was heard. Karim had returned to the city, but his presence lingered in Cedar Grove through frequent video calls and a small team of representatives who had set up a temporary office in town. Isabella was surprised to find herself in almost daily communication with him, their conversations ranging from project specifics to broader discussions about sustainable development and community preservation. One particularly tense evening, after a grueling town council meeting, Isabella decided to clear her head with a walk by Cedar Lake. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. As she approached the old boathouse, she was startled to see a familiar figure sitting on the dock. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she called out, unable to hide her surprise. "I didn't know you were back in town." Karim turned, a weary smile on his face. "I arrived a few hours ago. I needed to see things for myself again." He gestured to the empty space beside him. "Would you care to join me?" Isabella hesitated for a moment before sitting down, her legs dangling over the water. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance on the lake's surface. "It's beautiful here," Karim said softly. "I can see why you fight so hard for it." Isabella glanced at him, noting the tension in his shoulders. "It's more than just the scenery. It's the people, the history, the sense of belonging." She paused, then asked, "What brought you back so suddenly?" Karim sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The board is not entirely pleased with the revised plans. They're pushing for more concessions, faster implementation. I needed to ground myself in the reality of what we're dealing with here." Isabella felt a surge of anger on behalf of her town, but also an unexpected pang of sympathy for the man beside her. "That can't be easy, caught between two worlds like this." He turned to look at her, his green eyes reflecting the moonlight. "No, it's not. But I'm starting to realize which world I want to be a part of." The weight of his words hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Isabella felt her heart racing, aware of how close they were sitting, how easy it would be to... A loud crack of thunder shattered the moment. They both jumped to their feet as the sky opened up, rain pouring down in sheets. "Quick, the boathouse!" Isabella shouted over the sudden downpour. They ran for shelter, laughing despite the soaking, and burst through the old wooden doors just as a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the lake. Inside the musty boathouse, surrounded by the smell of old wood and the sound of rain on the roof, Isabella became acutely aware of how close she and Karim were standing. Water dripped from his hair, and she resisted the urge to brush it away from his forehead. "Well," Karim said, a hint of amusement in his voice, "this is certainly one way to experience Cedar Grove's charms." Isabella couldn't help but laugh. "We do like to keep things exciting for our visitors." As they stood there, catching their breath and dripping on the old floorboards, the atmosphere between them shifted. Karim's gaze softened as he looked at her, and Isabella felt a warmth that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "Isabella," he said quietly, using her first name for the first time. "I want you to know that I—" But whatever he was about to say was cut off by the sound of sirens in the distance. They both turned towards the noise, the spell broken. "That's the flood warning," Isabella said, her instincts kicking in. "We need to get back to town. Some of the lower areas might need evacuation." Karim nodded, his expression shifting from the man she'd glimpsed to the capable businessman she'd first met. "Lead the way. I want to help, however I can." As they ran back towards the town center, the rain still pouring down, Isabella felt a complex mix of emotions. Concern for her community warred with the lingering warmth of the moment in the boathouse. And beneath it all, a growing certainty that her relationship with Karim al-Rashid had become far more complicated than she'd ever anticipated. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Isabella found herself working alongside Karim and other townspeople to sandbag vulnerable areas, help elderly residents to higher ground, and coordinate with emergency services. Through it all, she couldn't help but notice how seamlessly Karim had integrated himself into the community's efforts, his expensive clothes as soaked and muddy as everyone else's. As dawn broke, the immediate danger had passed, but the storm had left its mark on Cedar Grove. Standing on the steps of the town hall, surveying the damage, Isabella felt a mix of relief and determination. The cleanup would be challenging, but she knew her community would come together, as it always had. She felt Karim's presence beside her before he spoke. "Your town is remarkable," he said softly. "The way everyone came together, without hesitation. I've never seen anything like it." Isabella turned to him, seeing the genuine awe in his eyes. "This is what I've been trying to show you all along. This is what we're fighting to preserve." Karim nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I understand that now more than ever." He paused, then added, "And I think I know what we need to do next." As the sun rose over Cedar Grove, casting a golden light on the rain-soaked streets, Isabella felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that something fundamental had changed, not just in Karim's perspective, but in the very fabric of their shared story. In the days following the storm, Cedar Grove buzzed with activity. The community's spirit shone through as neighbors helped each other clean up and repair damage. Amidst this flurry of cooperation, Karim's presence became an increasingly common sight. He rolled up his sleeves alongside townspeople, offering both manual labor and financial support for the recovery efforts. Isabella found herself working closely with him, coordinating volunteers and resources. She couldn't help but notice the change in how the town regarded him. No longer just a corporate outsider, but someone who had stood with them in a time of need. One afternoon, as they took a break from clearing debris near the old market district, Karim turned to Isabella with a determined look. "I think it's time we revisited the development plans. After everything that's happened, I have some new ideas I'd like to propose." Isabella nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at his use of "we." "What did you have in mind?" "I want to integrate more of Cedar Grove's existing infrastructure into the project," Karim explained, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. "Instead of building a separate facility, we could renovate and expand some of the older buildings. It would preserve the town's character while still bringing in new opportunities." The idea was intriguing, and as they discussed the details, Isabella found herself genuinely excited about the possibilities. It felt like they were finally finding a middle ground that could benefit everyone. However, their progress was not without obstacles. Sarah, Karim's advisor, arrived in town a few days later, her sleek corporate attire a stark contrast to the mud-stained work clothes most people were wearing. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she said, her voice tense as she cornered them outside the town hall. "The board is growing impatient. They're questioning your judgment and the constant changes to the plan. We need to move forward with the original proposal, or we risk losing the entire project." Isabella felt her heart sink as she watched Karim's expression harden. He glanced at her apologetically before turning to Sarah. "Set up a video conference with the board. I'll address their concerns directly." As Sarah walked away satisfied, Karim turned back to Isabella. "I'm sorry, I need to handle this. Can we talk later?" Isabella nodded, trying to mask her disappointment. "Of course. You know where to find me." The next few days brought a noticeable shift. Karim was suddenly less visible around town, caught up in long conference calls and meetings with his corporate team. When Isabella did see him, he seemed distracted and tense. Worry gnawed at her. Had all their progress been for nothing? Was Cedar Grove still at risk of being transformed beyond recognition? Her concerns came to a head one evening as she was closing up the store. Karim appeared at the door looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice strained. Isabella nodded, leading him to the back office where they could have some privacy. As soon as the door closed behind them, Karim began to pace. "The board is pushing hard for the original plan," he said, frustration evident in every word. "They don't understand what we've been trying to do here. They're threatening to remove me from the project if I don't comply." Isabella felt a surge of anger on his behalf. "After everything you've done? Everything you've learned about this town?" Karim stopped pacing, turning to face her with a pained expression. "I know. I've been fighting them, trying to make them see what I see now. But they're looking at numbers, not people. They don't understand the value of what we'd be destroying." In that moment, seeing the conflict in his eyes, Isabella realized just how much Karim had changed since they first met. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Then make them understand. You have the power to show them what Cedar Grove really means, just like you showed me what your vision could be." Karim looked down at her hand, then back to her face. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotions. "Isabella," he said softly, "I don't know if I can—" A knock at the office door interrupted them. They stepped apart quickly as Elena's voice called out, "Bella, are you still here?" "Coming, Abuela," Isabella replied, her voice slightly shaky. She turned back to Karim. "Whatever you decide, know that Cedar Grove is worth fighting for. We're worth fighting for." The weight of her words hung between them as she left the office. Karim remained behind, his expression a mix of determination and conflict. Over the next few days, Cedar Grove held its collective breath. Rumors flew about secret meetings and corporate ultimatums. Isabella threw herself into community work, trying to distract herself from the gnawing uncertainty. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, Karim called a town meeting. As the community gathered in the square, tension thick in the air, he stood before them, looking both weary and resolute. "I've spent the last few days in intense negotiations with my board," he began. "It hasn't been easy, but I've managed to convince them to approve a compromise plan." A murmur ran through the crowd as Karim outlined the new proposal. It wasn't everything they had hoped for, but it was a far cry from the original plan that would have transformed Cedar Grove beyond recognition. The historic market district would be preserved and integrated into the new development. Local businesses would have priority in supply contracts. Environmental protections would be put in place to safeguard the town's natural beauty. As Karim spoke, his eyes frequently found Isabella's in the crowd. She could see the battle he'd fought reflected in his gaze, and her heart swelled with a mix of pride and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. When the meeting ended, the town buzzed with cautious optimism. People approached Karim, shaking his hand and expressing their thanks. Isabella hung back, watching as the man who had once been their adversary was slowly embraced by the community. Finally, as the crowd thinned, Karim made his way to her. "Well?" he asked, a hint of his old confidence returning. "What do you think?" Isabella looked up at him, a small smile playing at her lips. "I think, Mr. Hel Rashid, that you might just have saved Cedar Grove's soul." As they stood there, surrounded by the town they had both fought for in their own ways, Isabella realized that more than just Cedar Grove had been transformed. Something had changed between them, something that felt both thrilling and terrifying in its potential. The future stretched out before them, full of challenges and possibilities. But for now, in this moment, they had found a bridge between their worlds, and perhaps Isabella thought something even more precious in the process. As autumn deepened in Cedar Grove, the town settled into a new rhythm. Construction crews worked alongside local craftsmen to renovate old buildings, while community meetings buzzed with plans for integrating new opportunities with cherished traditions. At the center of it all were Isabella and Karim, their partnership evolving as they navigated the complexities of bringing their shared vision to life. One crisp morning, Isabella found herself walking with Karim through the old market district. The area was a hive of activity, with scaffolding wrapped around historic facades and the sound of hammers mixing with excited chatter. I still can't believe how far we've come, Isabella mused, watching as an artisan carefully restored a century-old storefront sign. Karim nodded, his eyes scanning the scene with a mix of pride and something softer, more personal. It's all thanks to you, you know. If you hadn't opened my eyes. Isabella felt a blush creep up her cheeks. We did this together. You were willing to listen, to change. That's rare in someone in your position. Their eyes met, and for a moment the bustle around them seemed to fade away. Karim opened his mouth as if to say something, but was interrupted by a call from one of the project managers. The moment passed, leaving Isabella with a familiar flutter in her stomach and a growing certainty that her feelings for Karim had become far more complex than she'd ever anticipated. As the weeks passed, these moments of connection became more frequent, yet always seemed to be interrupted. A lingering glance over community plans, fingers brushing as they passed documents back and forth, quiet conversations that strayed from business to more personal topics, all hinting at something deeper growing between them. The changing dynamic didn't go unnoticed. Elena watched her granddaughter with knowing eyes, while Michael's friendly banter took on an edge of concern. Even Sarah, during her occasional visits to oversee corporate interests, seemed to regard Isabella with a mix of curiosity and veiled competition. One evening, as Isabella was closing up the store, she was surprised to see Karim waiting outside, a picnic basket in hand. I thought you might like to see the sunset from Cedar Point, he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. To celebrate how far the project has come. Isabella hesitated only briefly before agreeing. As they walked to the scenic overlook, their conversation flowed easily, touching on their hopes for the town's future and their own personal dreams. At the top of the hill, Karim spread out a blanket and produced an array of local delicacies, all sourced from Cedar Grove businesses, Isabella noted with appreciation. As the sun began to sink below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, Karim turned to Isabella, his expression serious. There's something I need to tell you, he began. Isabella's heart raced, but before Karim could continue, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Michael appeared on the path, his face flushed with exertion. Bella, there you are, he called out, his eyes darting between her and Karim. There's an issue at the community center. They need you right away. The moment shattered, Isabella and Karim quickly packed up the picnic. As they hurried back to town, Isabella couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration at the constant interruptions, even as her concern for the community took precedence. The issue at the community center turned out to be a minor misunderstanding about the renovation plans, easily resolved with Isabella's mediation. As the small crowd dispersed, she found herself alone with Michael. So, he said, his tone casual but his eyes intent, you and Al-Rashid seem to be spending a lot of time together lately. Isabella sighed, recognizing the protective concern in her old friend's voice. Michael, it's not what you think. We're just working closely on the project. Are you sure that's all it is? Michael pressed. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you might be falling for the guy who once wanted to tear our town apart. His words hit close to home, forcing Isabella to confront feelings she'd been trying to ignore. It's complicated, she admitted. Karim's changed. He's not the same person who first came to Cedar Grove. Michael's expression softened. Just be careful, Bella. I don't want to see you get hurt. And remember, when this project is over, he'll be going back to his world. Are you prepared for that? The question lingered in Isabella's mind, long after she'd bid Michael good night. As she walked home under the starlit sky, she found herself at a crossroads. Her feelings for Karim had grown into something she could no longer deny, but the future was uncertain. Could their two worlds truly come together, or were they destined to remain apart once the project was complete? Lost in thought, Isabella almost didn't notice Karim waiting for her outside the store. When she looked up and saw him, her heart skipped a beat. I'm sorry about earlier, he said, stepping closer. There's something I've been wanting to tell you, something I can't keep to myself any longer. Isabella held her breath, aware that whatever Karim said next would change everything. The cool night air seemed to crackle with possibility as they stood facing each other, the old store sign creaking gently in the breeze above them. Isabella, Karim began, his voice low and intense. Working with you, getting to know Cedar Grove and its people. It's changed me in ways I never expected. I came here thinking I knew what progress looked like, but you've shown me that true value isn't always measured in profits or expansion. It's in the connections we make, the communities we build." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "What I'm trying to say is, I think I'm falling in love with you. And not just you, but everything you represent. This town, this way of life. I don't want to leave when the project is over. I want to find a way to bridge our worlds, to build something lasting here. With you." Isabella's heart soared at his words, even as her mind raced with the implications. She thought of her grandmother, of Michael's warnings, of the life she'd always known in Cedar Grove. But looking into Karim's eyes, seeing the sincerity and hope there, she knew her answer. "Karim," she said softly, reaching out to take his hand, "I think I'm falling in love with you too, but you're right. It's not just about us, it's about finding a balance between progress and tradition, between your world and mine. Are you sure you're ready for that challenge?" Karim's face broke into a radiant smile. "With you by my side, I'm ready for anything." As they stood there, hands clasped and hearts open, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall around them. It was a magical moment, full of promise and possibility. Isabella knew that challenges lay ahead. Skepticism from some townspeople, pressure from Karim's corporate world, the delicate balance of preserving Cedar Grove's character while embracing new opportunities. But in that moment, with the snow gently falling and Karim's warmth beside her, she felt ready to face whatever the future might bring. Their kiss, when it finally came, felt like the beginning of a new chapter, not just for them, but for Cedar Grove itself. As they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Isabella looked up at the gently swirling snow and smiled. Change was coming to her beloved town, but for the first time, she was truly excited to see what that change might bring. The winter months in Cedar Grove passed in a whirlwind of activity and emotion. As snow blanketed the town in a soft white glow, the development project continued to progress, now infused with a renewed sense of purpose and community involvement. Isabella and Karim's relationship blossomed alongside the town's transformation, their personal and professional lives intertwining in ways that both excited and challenged them. News of their romance spread quickly through the tight-knit community, eliciting a mix of reactions. Many, like Elena, were supportive, seeing their union as a symbol of the positive changes coming to Cedar Grove. Others, including Michael, remained cautiously optimistic, watching closely to ensure that the town's interests remained protected. One frosty morning, as Isabella and Karim walked hand in hand through the partially renovated market district, they were approached by Mrs. Thompson, her silver hair peeking out from beneath a woolen hat. "Well, well," she said, a twinkle in her eye, "if it isn't our very own Romeo and Juliet. Though I do hope your story has a happier ending." Isabella laughed, squeezing Karim's hand. "We're writing our own story, Mrs. Thompson, one chapter at a time." As they continued their walk, discussing plans for a new community garden that would integrate with the development, Isabella marveled at how natural it felt to have Karim by her side. He had become not just a partner in love, but a true ally in her mission to preserve and enhance Cedar Grove's spirit. However, their journey was not without its challenges. As spring approached, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, it also heralded the arrival of increased scrutiny from Karim's corporate world. Sarah arrived one sunny afternoon, her crisp suit a stark contrast to the casual attire of the townsfolk preparing for the annual spring festival. "The board is concerned about the project's timeline," she informed Karim, her eyes darting to where Isabella stood nearby. "They're questioning whether your personal involvement is clouding your judgment." Karim's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "My personal life has only enhanced my commitment to this project, Sarah. I'll address the board's concerns directly, set up a video conference for tomorrow." As Sarah walked away, Isabella approached Karim, concern etched on her face. "Is everything okay?" He pulled her close, kissing her forehead gently. "It will be. This project, this town, they're all part of my future now. I won't let anyone jeopardize that." The next few weeks brought a flurry of negotiations and presentations as Karim worked tirelessly to convince his board of the value of their revised approach. Isabella stood by him, offering support and insight, her intimate knowledge of Cedar Grove proving invaluable in articulating the project's unique benefits. Their efforts paid off. By the time the Spring Festival arrived, Karim had secured full backing for their vision, with the promise of additional resources to ensure its success. The festival itself became a celebration not just of the season, but of Cedar Grove's bright future. As lanterns twinkled in the twilight and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air, Isabella found herself standing on the same stage where she had once challenged Karim's original plans. This time they stood together, hands clasped, facing a sea of familiar faces. "A year ago," Isabella began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "we thought we were facing the end of Cedar Grove as we knew it, but today we are celebrating a new beginning, one that honors our past while embracing our future." Karim stepped forward, his presence now a welcome sight to most of the townspeople. "Thanks to Isabella and all of you, I've learned that true progress isn't about erasing what came before, but building upon it. Cedar Grove has become more than just a project to me. It's become my home." A cheer went up from the crowd, and Isabella felt her heart swell with pride and love, for Karim, for her town, for the future they were building together. As the festival continued around them, Karim led Isabella away from the crowds to a quiet spot by Cedar Lake. The moon reflected off the calm water, creating a magical atmosphere. "There's something I want to ask you," Karim said, his voice soft but filled with emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Isabella Martinez, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy welled in Isabella's eyes as she nodded, words failing her for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, of course I will." As Karim slipped the ring, a beautiful piece that combined modern design with elements inspired by Cedar Grove's history, onto her finger, Isabella felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of fireworks exploding overhead, a serendipitous celebration of their engagement. As they turned to watch the colorful display, Isabella leaned into Karim's embrace, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. In the days that followed, as news of their engagement spread, Isabella and Karim found themselves at the center of a joyous whirlwind. The town buzzed with excitement, seeing their union as the ultimate symbol of the positive changes taking root in Cedar Grove. Eleanor, with happy tears in her eyes, hugged them both tightly. "Your parents would be so proud, mi amor," she told Isabella. "You've not only protected our home but helped it grow in ways we never imagined." Even Michael, who had been one of the most skeptical, approached them with a genuine smile. "I have to admit," he said, shaking Karim's hand, "you've proven me wrong. I'm happy for you both, and for Cedar Grove." As spring blossomed into summer, the town's transformation continued apace. The renovated market district opened to great fanfare, a harmonious blend of historic charm and modern efficiency. New businesses sprouted alongside beloved local institutions, creating a vibrant economy that honored Cedar Grove's past while looking to the future. Isabella and Karim threw themselves into wedding plans, determined to create a celebration that would reflect both their love story and the spirit of their community. They decided to hold the ceremony in the town square, the very place where their journey had begun. On a perfect summer day, with the scent of roses filling the air, Isabella walked down an aisle lined with Cedar Grove's residents. Karim waited for her beneath an arch woven with local wildflowers, his eyes shining with love and promise. As they exchanged vows pledging not only their love for each other, but their commitment to Cedar Grove and its future, Isabella felt a profound sense of completion. They had faced challenges, overcome obstacles, and in the process, had not only found each other, but had helped shape a new destiny for the town they both loved. The reception that followed was a joyous blend of traditions. Middle Eastern melodies mixed with local folk tunes. Gourmet dishes sat alongside Mrs. Thompson's famous apple pie. It was a testament to the beautiful fusion of cultures and ideas that Cedar Grove now represented. As the sun set on their perfect day, Isabella and Karim snuck away for a moment alone. Standing on the shores of Cedar Lake, just as they had on that fateful night when Karim first arrived in town, they looked out over the water. "I can't believe how much has changed," Isabella mused, leaning into her new husband's embrace. Karim kissed the top of her head gently. "And yet the most important things have stayed the same. The spirit of this town, the love of its people, that's what drew me in, what made me want to be a part of it all. Isabella turned to face him, her heart full of love and excitement for their shared future. So, Mr. Al-Rashid, are you ready for our next big adventure? Karim's smile was radiant as he pulled her close. With you by my side, Mrs. Al-Rashid Martinez, I'm ready for anything. As they sealed their promise with a kiss, the first stars of evening began to twinkle overhead. Cedar Grove had weathered change and embraced new beginnings, emerging stronger and more vibrant than ever. And at the heart of it all stood Isabella and Karim, their love story a testament to the power of understanding, compromise, and the enduring spirit of community.